Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drill Down. Everyone, it seems, has an opinion on TikTok, whose fate is going to be decided soon. This is an app that is the most popular app among teenagers, and its future is going to be decided by an incoming president who's 78 years old and a Supreme Court whose median age is about 70. We're going to discuss it today and what opinions really matter on this topic. The co-host of this program, of course, Eric Edgars. Eric, how are you?
I feel compelled, Peter Schweizer, to mention, since we're age checking everybody, that while Trump may be 78 and the Supreme Court 70, you're 60. And so, I guess that makes you a relative voice of youth. And between the two of us, we have over 100 years of experience and exactly 0 TikTok accounts. So what makes us perfect.
True. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. To talk about this. I love this story. And, what I love about this story is a lot of different things. It's amazing. It involves the Supreme Court. It involves Donald Trump. It involves Elon Musk, millions of preteens, internet dancing, and my favorite of all these internet trends, Peter Schweizer. Because objectively speaking, this is my favorite topic because of all the topics we talk about. My favorite ones are the ones that are your fault. And this, I hate to say it, is actually your fault.
How so? How is this my fault?
So anybody that's been watching this program or listening to this podcast for some time might recall that you wrote a little book that you can see over your shoulder in the video of this called Blood Money. And in that book, which came out, do you remember when it was published?
February of 2024.
February 27th of 2024.
Yeah.
So you come out with this book, which became, to quote your publisher, not just a book, it was a movement. I mean, this thing was #1 for a ton of time, but one of the damning revelations in your book was about TikTok and how China used TikTok as a weapon for warfare against the United States. There's lots of interesting things. We'll talk about it. But the point is, you unveiled lots of things about TikTok and why it's no good for everybody. The next month, Congress passed the bill that led to the ban. Yeah. The month after that, Joe Biden signed that law. And so the reason why the Supreme Court's even hearing arguments is, because of some of the arguments that you first made in your book last year. Hence, this is your fault.
Well, we're very proud of the fact that we played a role in this. We did, of course, meet with the chairman of the China Select Committee, who was, crucial in getting this bill pushed through. We also met with a number of senators. And what we really tried to do in that book, and what we're going to talk about today, is what opinions really matter on TikTok. Because as we said at the beginning, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got a hot take. You've got people who are saying, no, I think it's terrible. This is what China's doing. You've got other people that say, no, this is ridiculous. This is just like any other app. What's the big deal? The opinion that I think ultimately matters here is what? It's the opinion of the Chinese, the people who control this app. So we want to talk about that today, and we want to talk about the larger implications of what this means and where this story is actually going to be going.
Well, you're right that lots of people have opinions because the Supreme Court is going to give their opinion. We expect them to ultimately say, the delay will stay in fact, and maybe the Biden administration can enact, I think, a 3-month ban, because if they don't, TikTok will be shut down for domestic use this weekend, I believe.
Yeah.
And so you've got lots and lots of people arguing for an extension of that, and there's really kind of no reason not to do it, except for the old national security concerns, which we'll get to. But yeah, Mike Pence and 24 other attorney generals have filed briefs with the Supreme Court saying, hey, we got to force this divestiture, that you should force ByteDance to sell to American interests, get this thing separated from the Chinese Communist Party. Donald Trump, though, surprisingly, has taken a different stance, and he filed an amicus brief saying, let's have a little bit of a delay. Let's just take some time to think about that. Why does Donald Trump want there to be a ban, or why does he want there to be a delay on the ban?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know exactly the reason why he wants to have a delay on the ban. It could be a couple of things. One could be Trump is looking for another arrow in his quiver that he can point at the Chinese, right? He's looking at tariffs. He's looking at these other issues. There may also be indications that he's had a change of heart. He wanted TikTok banned earlier. He's recently talked about how much great coverage he was allowed to have in the 2024 campaign. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the podcast. But I think there's two basic things that people have to understand about this bill before we get into the Chinese perspective and these larger issues. The first one is the bill does not actually force the ban of TikTok. What it says is that the parent company, ByteDance, needs to divest itself. They need to sell control of TikTok to an American-controlled entity. So if TikTok actually magically goes away because of this bill, it's because the Chinese owners say, we would rather take our ball and go home than actually sell it to someone else. Sell it, of course, they'll be made whole. They'll make a lot of money. But if they actually walk away and say, no, we'd rather just let this thing die, it's an indication to me of what their real interests are. So the first thing we have to understand is the decision that has to be made about this bill. The second thing I have to say is that I've been struck by a lot of people who are critical of this bill, who say, oh, come on, this is just like Facebook. This is just like everything else. It's what in the Cold War, they used to call mirror imaging, right? So they would look at the Cold War and say, well, we have a peace movement in the United States. The Soviet Union has a peace movement. We should all get together and just talk about peace. But of course, their peace movement was run by the Soviet government. So a lot of people who want to equate TikTok to an American app or say it's just like Facebook and they do the same sorts of things are completely missing the boat. And what's going to happen, by the way, if the Chinese say we're not going to sell it, is it's not that TikTok will be banned and completely disappear. What it means is that American platforms, things like Apple, for example, can't have it on anymore in their store. They can't do updates. So it's going to die this sort of grisly digital death because there won't be any updates going forward. So that is where things are going to be headed in the next couple of weeks or couple of months.
To your point about ignoring the Chinese influence and the Chinese presence and what they use it for, the Wall Street Journal had a line in their article about what's happening right now. Beijing's potential involvement in a deal to help TikTok avert a U.S. ban could undermine the company's assertion that it operates independently of Chinese authorities.
Exactly. And that's a crucial point you bring up here. It's exactly right. And the thing we have to understand is that one of the many reasons that TikTok is different than an American social media company is that all companies have their secrets, right? So if you're a tech company, your algorithm is a secret. Facebook doesn't want other people to know their algorithm because that's the secret juice that makes the company run. TikTok has the same thing. But the difference is Facebook's algorithm is a Facebook or Meta corporate secret. TikTok's corporate secret, the algorithm, is also a Chinese state secret, meaning the government itself controls that algorithm. So any kind of deal that TikTok or ByteDance, the parent company, would want to make to sort of sell or divest it would be subject to the Chinese government approval anyway, because the actual algorithm, which makes the whole thing run, is controlled by the Chinese state.
Yeah, that to me was one of the biggest revelations from Blood Money, the fact that the algorithm is a Chinese state secret, effectively, and the fact that China's version of TikTok is not the U.S. version of TikTok. It is a healthier, it is a cleaner, to the extent that the Chinese version of TikTok is a box of donuts, or like that the United States version of TikTok is a box of donuts. The Chinese version of TikTok is like celery and carrots, right?
Yeah. But I like donuts. So let's say a bag of pork rinds. Can we say that instead? Because donuts to me have quasi-healthy features to them because I love donuts.
But to the point, like lots of people like donuts, lots of people like pork rinds, lots of people like TikTok. I asked you this before. How many worldwide downloads do you think TikTok has, according to the most current stats?
I'm just going to say 1 billion.
Yeah, you would say 1 billion. You would be off by a few billion. It's 4.92 billion downloads worldwide. And that's, by the way, with countries like India who have banned it. They banned it several years ago for the same concerns. And what's different about India than the United States? And why would they maybe take security concerns from China more seriously than the United States do? They're on a dang border with China.
Yeah, they are.
And so, so actually, if you look at other countries that have banned it, it's India, it's Nepal, it's Afghanistan. And so it is a new thing that people are waking up to exactly what China's been doing with this. But TikTok is worldwide, it is everywhere. TikTok is so popular, Peter Schweizer, it's actually been speculated that Gavin Newsom was listening to TikTok videos when he was doing that shoulder dance while touring the fire. Like, it's everywhere.
That would not surprise me at all.
No, I know. It's bad. So yeah, it's and of course a lot of the United States is very popular, and that's one of the reasons why people expect them to find a way to keep it open, because Donald Trump's not trying to alienate 170 million users in the United States.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk just a little bit. There's of course a lot of details in the Blood Money book, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, but let's just talk a little bit about what the Chinese government officials actually themselves say about TikTok. And it's important to keep in mind, as we talked about in the book and on the podcast, ByteDance, the parent company that controls TikTok, does joint research with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, which is their spy apparatus, on how to manipulate people online. In fact, the corporate headquarters of ByteDance is in the same area as the Ministry of State Security. But what do they actually say about the app? Well, we quote Chinese Communist Party officials who say that TikTok is, quote, a modern-day Trojan horse that could be deployed against the West. That's a pretty stunning statement. We have quotes from a Chinese Communist Party journal, which says that it is part of, quote unquote, information-driven mental warfare against the West. In other words, we're going to dumb down Americans. This is, to your point, why their version of TikTok, which is Douyin, is very different than ours. Ours has people in blue hair doing silly dances. Theirs has like scientific experiments, studies in literature. Those are the sorts of things they emphasize. Another Chinese Communist Party journal says younger People's Liberation Army propagandists increasingly realize the popularity of short videos online, and TikTok is the best example of this so far. And they go on to talk about ways in which you can use these kinds of apps like TikTok to manipulate people emotionally online. So the bottom line is, while everybody is spitballing their opinions on, is this a problem or not, the Chinese have been studying this for years, and they've made up their mind that it's a powerful weapon, and they are using it as a powerful weapon now to manipulate and dumb down America's youth.
It's weird and it's complicated because there are freedom of speech related issues here.
Yeah.
But what's also true, and this is something, we produced this documentary, which we refer to, it's called The Creepy Lon, and it talked about Google and Facebook. But one of the big takeaways for me from that is there's always a lag between when a technology is invented and introduced into society and how we as a society figure out how to effectively govern its use and what is, who can use it safely. And we use the example of a car. Cars were around for 60, 80 years before seatbelts became a thing, and then longer than that until they were required. And I do think we're having to, because of China, figure out, hey, what is safe and what's unsafe, like not just in terms of national security interests, but the overall well-being of our teens and our youth. And you've seen other countries come up with social media bans, period, for children underneath a certain age. And I think that there's a reason for that. Remember, I was just stunned. The state of New York introduced legislation that said, hey, we're going to suggest that social media apps, including TikTok, they have to change their algorithm so that it can't be based on what somebody likes. It's just going to be chronological because we think kids, their brains aren't fully formed, trying to make it less addictive.
Yeah.
So we want it to be like a cleaner, you can still watch the videos, but the algorithm needs to change.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, no way. So to your point, I mean, that's how wedded China is to this algorithm, because this thing is good for them, not the least of which maybe they're stealing our information, but they are waging literal mental warfare against our citizens and our children.
Yeah, they are. And look, we have talked on this podcast, you and I both have, about the problems with big tech in general. So Facebook, for example, which is owned, American-owned, American-based company, also has terrible social effects on young people and problems. But I think there's some really important distinctions we have to draw here. It's not that the people at Facebook are just better people.
Well, they are now. Mark Zuckerberg met with Trump. He's done Joe Rogan. His hair grew out. I don't know if you saw that. He's you talk about Facebook is based in America. Facebook is just based. You could end it right there. It's a new Zuck.
Yeah, but I mean, that I think proves the point, which is that American companies, by their nature, have to be responsive to the American government, American political trends. So look at what has been the posture of Meta. Trump came in with a reform agenda towards big tech. Mark Zuckerberg is throwing money to the inauguration committee. He's coming out, with all these statements about the political pressures that he had under the Biden administration. Congressional committees held investigations. They used subpoena powers. They got access to all those. Remember those email communications that came out? What has ByteDance done? Nothing. They bring the American CEO over, Chinese guy. He talks to the committees. He lies to the committees. He doesn't have to respond to subpoenas because all the important stuff's in China. They're not going to respond to those subpoenas. They're not kissing any ring. They're not showing a reformist agenda. What they're saying is, trust us. No, don't worry about it. The Chinese government's not in charge. Trust us. The algorithm's not a problem. Just trust us. It's as if, to your seatbelt analogy, there's some safety feature that has to be embedded in the engine, and all the American companies are lifting up the hoods and saying, look, we've got it in there. And the Chinese are saying, nope, you can't lift up the hood. Just trust us. We put that safety device in the engine. So that's the problem I think we have to understand. It's not that American big tech is great. They're not. Yeah. But they are forced to respond in certain ways that a Chinese-owned company simply does not.
No, it's an excellent point. And by the way, just because you brought up Mark Zuckerberg, it's worth pointing out if he's now friendly with Trump, Trump is kind of positioning himself to be this ultimate deal maker here. You have Kevin O'Leary, who's been very close with Donald Trump. He's submitted an official bid. He's trying to buy the Chinese version of it. And so he's like sort of negotiating, saying, hey, listen, I need Joe Biden to extend this thing for 3 months so we can continue to do it. And that's part of the provision as well, is if a sale is pending, they have 3 more months to try to work this out. But don't discount Mark Zuckerberg's interest in this, because we mentioned the fact that India had previously banned TikTok. Guess what became really popular in India when TikTok went away? Facebook, Instagram Reels, all that stuff, right? So, I mean, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And, Elon Musk has obviously been meeting with Donald Trump. He actually met and has been friends with TikTok CEO for some time, and there were rumors that he was positioned to buy TikTok, but I guess those have been referred to as pure fiction.
Yeah, somebody's referred to them as pure fiction, except you never know with Elon Musk, right? I mean, he always makes different decisions. You make, I think, a really important point, which is this whole process, which I think there is a general consensus in Washington that you can't have the status quo. You cannot have a Chinese-based company controlled by the CCP having this level of influence with America's youth. So it's going to have to be sold to somebody. There's going to be a lot of political decisions and a lot of conflicts based on how that decision goes down, because you've got a guy like Mark Zuckerberg who's not going to be able to buy it. Any purchase is going to have to be approved by the federal government, and just on antitrust grounds. Yeah. You cannot have Instagram buying this other social media outlet. But he would want what? What would Zuckerberg want? He would want TikTok to crash and burn, because then everybody's going to go to his product. On the other hand, if you have a guy like Kevin O'Leary, other people in the tech sector, they obviously want it to thrive. I think it would be good to have TikTok with new ownership, so you have a diversity and you have competition between these platforms. So it's going to be an interesting process to see how it plays out, and we're just going to have to see. But I think that the ban is going to be upheld by the Supreme Court. And I think the American president, whether it is Joe Biden, who has to make a decision on the 19th, the day before he leaves, he's going to extend this process for 6 months, or Donald Trump, they're going to have to make a decision how to handle it. And the law does not allow any wiggle room. It's not like Donald Trump can say, I've changed my mind, it's okay. The law is very, very clear. These kinds of social media platforms cannot be controlled by hostile foreign powers. So it is going to have to be sold, or it is going to effectively be banned in the United States.
This would be the law that's your fault, the law that they passed after your book came out. Now, it's worth pointing this out because there's been some suspicion. We talked about like Mark Zuckerberg and what happened in India, and Instagram and Reels became quite popular. So what's interesting is just in response to this pending and looming potential TikTok ban, CNN reported that a growing number of social media users are moving to a different Chinese social media app. It's got a Chinese name, but it means basically little red book. It actually surged. So the number one app on Apple's App Store on Tuesday, earlier this week, was actually this other Chinese social media app. It was founded in 2013. It's huge in China. It's got 300 million users. It's described as China's answer to Instagram. But what's your take on the fact that everyone seems to be moving to a different Chinese app? Is it sort of trolling? Is it protest? Is it because Americans have become addicted to receiving Chinese propaganda? And do you think that this app would also be banned under this law? Because the Washington Post said, well, this could set up sort of a game of whack-a-mole. Like, okay, this Chinese app's gone. Now this Chinese app pops up. And what do you see happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you may end up with whack-a-mole. I mean, the problem is if the mole pops up and it's not allowed to be there, you got to whack it. So it may be the case that with this red book, they're going to have to do it. I think most people, when they see an app or they hear about an app, they don't concern themselves with who owns it. They just assume they're kind of all the same. They assume because it's on the Apple Store, it's generally going to be safe. So I don't know that people have the level of awareness. You certainly see that with a lot of the commerce sites, right? What is it? Shine is one of them called Shine, I think, or Temu.
Yeah, Temu.
Yeah. These are Chinese-based, e-commerce apps that are also enormously popular. Don't represent the same kind of threat that this informational app does. So yeah, it may end up being whack-a-mole, but the law that is the TikTok ban law, as it's being described, does not apply just to TikTok. It says any app that is based in a hostile country that is in the social media sphere, hostile country could be China, could be Russia, could be Iran, is subject to this kind of scrutiny, this kind of ban. And I think that Donald Trump's posture towards China, which I favor, has been very, very hawkish and very, very skeptical. And even though he's expressed kind of this warmth that, TikTok, I had a lot of videos on TikTok during the election, as he becomes more hardline in implementing his Chinese policies, TikTok's posture towards Trump online is going to change.
No, absolutely. And if there's one thing that I think we now know about Donald Trump is that he's a huge fan of leverage.
Yeah.
And this ban or whatever this pending sale may be gives Donald Trump a ton of leverage in any negotiations with China, just like tariffs, just like the potential purchase of Greenland, just like border policy. He seems to be like, that's, I think there's that phrase, some people take Trump seriously and not literally, and some people take him literally and not seriously. I think he is serious about having a posture that allows him to have the upper hand in any negotiation. I think it's useful to consume his public policy pronouncements through that lens, right?
No, I think it's a brilliant point. I think that's exactly right. I think that's where he's going. Trump has said several times he's always negotiating.
Yeah.
And if you look back at his real estate career, right? If he's going to buy $100 million building from you in Manhattan, he's going to go there and say, oh, look, the electrical system's shot. I think the foundation's cracked. $100 million, I'll give you $40 million for it tops. He's trying to get you to the position, the price that he really wants, which is maybe $85 million or whatever. So in international diplomacy, it's the same thing. He wants China to deal with fentanyl. He's made clear about that. He wants them to get rid of these tariffs on American products and the ability of American companies to invest in China the way they're allowed to invest here.
25% versus 2.5%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he wants leverage. And if this is another arrow in his quiver, he absolutely wants it. And I'm not opposed to that because I think he has good instincts on China.
Well, it's January of 2025. So I think it's useful sometimes to view things through the lens of history and how much things can change. So a year ago, your book had yet to come out. TikTok, China's just gobbling up everything. American kids are freebasing and ODing off all the stimulating things.
Yeah.
We're now very different. The TikTok ban, the forced sale, which ultimately protects U.S. interests, is looming because of the book that came out within last year. And just for fun, to speak to how much things can change, when I was looking to figure out exactly when you started talking about TikTok and China trying to get a date, I found an interview you did on Fox and Friends, and the person you did the interview with is our future Secretary of Defense. So, just how much things can change
Things have
in a year.
changed. That's exactly right. The good news is they did not want to appoint me as Secretary of Defense because I think I'd run into some serious problems there. But at any rate, we appreciate you as always joining this podcast. We try to keep you up to date and current on our research and on events. And as you see, oftentimes the research we did yesterday is absolutely completely relevant today. And I think in the case of TikTok, that is absolutely true. So thank you for taking the time to listen. You can go to thedrilldown.com to find out more about the research we're doing. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. Thanks again. Until next time.